applied my thread base to the hook shank, I like to then come in here with some Loctite and I just run that across the thread. I like the thread to wick that super glue in there, and that's important because a lot of the flies that we're fishing with, as fishermen, we can't see the rate at which that hook has rusted underneath the materials. So just doing that adds another layer of durability to prevent that hook wicking the materials up and potentially rusting the shank of the hook. Right, I pre-prepared this rattle, which we filmed in the flexo tubing, and all I have to do now is lash this to the hook shank. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to position the rattle extending a little bit out from the hook to add to the sort of the body and the foundation of the fly underneath the proverbial shoulders of your hackle and your SF and your brush material. And what I'll do is I'll just get a good approximation of where I want that rattle to sit, more or less there, extending outwards. I will flatten the flexo material, just secure it with a few lashes. With my side cutters. Little dollar of Loctite so that the tubing doesn't slip out. So I've pre-prepared 6 hackles that I'm going to be using, 3 on each side. I really recommend doing your prep work, selecting the hackles, trimming them down prior to starting the fly. It just really helps with your enjoyment. I think clutter is a fly tie's worst enemy. So I have the feathers that I've already selected here. There's no right and no wrong way with regards to the selection of the feathers that you guys are going to be using. You need to gauge it in terms of the size of the hook that you're using. Have a look in hand. The key that I find is that you want a feather that is wide to give that fly body and profile, and has quite a bit of webby plumage at the base, which has got fantastic bulk and movement in the water, which is very, very, very important. So I've already pre-selected. I've got 2 sort of blurple grizzly hackles over there. I have 2 sort of different shade of purple. I don't know what you'd call that color. What would you call that, Gareth?
Really purple, like sexually frustrated purple, I think.
Okay,
is the term.
sexually frustrated purple over there. Again, you can have a look at how nice and webby the base of those hackles are, how nice and thick they are. And then I've gone in there and I've cherry picked some black. Okay, these are very, very, very important. Anyway, prior to tying those hackles in, what I want to do is I want to lay a foundation of either Steve Farrow blend or Mega Flash fiber from Fishient, which is just going to help once again create the shoulders and the structure underneath the fly to prevent the brush and the feathers from falling flat. Gareth and I discussed earlier, it's very important that the fly looks good in the water and in hand. So I've got some Mega Flash fiber over here. You can use SF blend, some people use bucktail. I like this Mega Flash fiber because I like the flash in it, but I also dislike some of the other flash in it. So I'm going to go get quite a nice, I'm going to select quite a nice sort of clump there. How big is the clump? How long is a piece of string? It depends on the size of the fly that you're using. Hopefully when I've tied this in here, it'll give you an idea more or less of the density of material you should select when apportioning this to your hook shank. So I'm going to select quite a nice little clump over there. I want to gauge it because this is going to encase this rattle. I just want to make sure more or less that's probably about twice and a bit the length of the flexo tubing in the rattle. I have cherry picked the silver flash in here and I've omitted this in here. Whether you want to use flash or not is obviously, it's a choice you can make. What I will do is I'll trim this, and what I will do is I'll place it on the top of the hook shank, 2 fingers, and I push it down in such a way that it surrounds the rattle on an equitable basis on the side that you're filming at and my side over here. I want the materials to be secure, but be sparing with the thread wraps. It all culminates in the overall weight of the fly. And what we've done is we're starting to create profile and bulk and hide that rattle. Now, a lot of people may ask me why I'm tying materials up the hook shank. I'm doing that to maintain proportion as the fly proceeds. It's nothing worse than having a big clump of materials or a sort of knob at that particular stage, which makes it very difficult to stack some of the fibers at a later stage. And at this particular point, I'll start laying down my feathers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them 3 aside, but at different spaces on the hook, just to assist with the overall aesthetic and the contrasting of the fly. So I'm going to lay, should we say, well, Gareth calls it the sexually frustrated purple down first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this slightly underneath the hook shank and not dead flat. I'll be positioning it there in a sort of Johnny King tented style. So not outwards, the curve of the feather is going to sort of lay flat against the fly like that. Now, a trick that I saw Gunnar Brammer doing is he likes to flatten the plume of the feather prior to tying it in, which just helps with the positioning and prevents that from losing its shape after it's got wet and dry a couple times. What I'm using here is just a crocodile clip. You can use a pair of scissors. I'm just using this crocodile clip, but what I'll do is the portion that I want to tie in, I squash so that that plume that's quite cylindrical is now flat. I don't like to tie the fly in at the start of where I've stripped the plumage off the feather. I like to tie a bit of the plumage in, again, because I think that helps keep the feather in place. Okay, which is, again, a small triviality. Do it, don't do it, but I think it makes a big difference to the overall aesthetic of the fly. I'll lay this down more or less where I want it. As I said, I'm not laying it flat. I'm laying it at a slight angle towards me. That's more or less where I want it. That seems okay at this point. My blurple grizzly feather, which is going to lie completely flat. I'm going to flatten that as well with the plume. Thanks, Gunnar. Really appreciate that tip. Have a look. Play around with your flies, manipulate the feathers to ensure everything's perfect. So far so good. And the final feather on the side, back up, will be black. So you have a light bottom and a black. So I've done the 3 feathers on the side that's closest to you, and as you can see, I've created quite a nice 3-dimensional shape to this fly. Okay, it's not just 3 flat feathers on the side, which gives us the profile that you want from every angle. Remember, GTs and the positioning of their eyes on the head, it would be quite accurate to say that the fish looks up when it's hunting. So you want that fly, wherever it is in the water column, to obviously have the accurate profile. So I've got 6 feathers on a side. As you can see, they sit nice and flush. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some flash. You can use all sorts of flash. Word of caution, I'd rather use less flash than more. I feel that too much flash puts these fish off. I'm going to select a single strand. What I've done here is I've just cut a little V out the side of the packet there. I'm going to go in here with my tip, and I'm going to choose a couple strands that I want to be working with, and then pull them out. Select my holographic flash. I'm going to use 1 strand on each side. Okay, lots of different ways, cool ways to apportion it. I want to apportion this in a specific way. So I'm going to tie it in. I'm going to lay this flat with the tip being marginally shorter in the length of the hackles. I want this lateral line flash to run along the proverbial lateral line of the fish. So, the fly. I'm going to flatten it, make sure it's more or less where I want it. And when it's in that position, I will then tie it down to ensure it's in the right place. Trim off the excess, and I will do the same on this side. Position the flash exactly where I want it. A few centimeters, few millimeters shorter than the feathers. It doesn't have to be the exact same length as the one on the alternate side. As soon as I'm satisfied that it is exactly where I want it, more or less. Take your time doing this, guys. Tie that down. Okay. Here we have fly starting to come along there. Right. The next aspect of this fly is to sort of help build in the shoulders towards the head. So I like to use the polar fiber streamer brush. I feel that the craft fiber is a bit too sparse, doesn't give that nice thick profile that we're looking for, in addition to the fact that this has got some amazing movement in the water. I don't think that you're really going to see much of this when it's sort of underneath the veiling of the sculpting fiber, but I do definitely think it makes a difference to create that transition period, transition sort of period over here into the shoulders of the fly. So grab myself some streamer brush. I want to be sparing with this brush material. Obviously it's tied onto wire. Wire will increase the weight of the fly. So I will tie this brush on the side of the hook that is closest to me, and I will tie in a stem of about 3 millimeters, nice and tight, with some thread wraps, and I will move the thread 3 or 4 millimeters away from the base of the hackle stem. So I'll attach the brush on there. I've unfortunately left my dog and cat brush tool at home, which is my preferred tool to use this to get the fibers out, but this has been lent to me very graciously by Ray over there, so I'll use this. What I'll do is the lucky number, or the secret number of wraps, is around 4 or 5 maximum, and you can determine that as you're wrapping. So the first thing I like to do is I like to pull all the fibers to the left, okay, in the same direction of the hackles, and as I wrap, I palmer them, pull them back with my left hand. That's one wrap, coming round, keep the palmering coming. 2, keep the wraps very close to one another, okay, nice and tight. Here's number 3, still palmering. Here's number 4. Gauge it. I think we'll do one more. And number 5. Still palmering all those fibers to the left, and you will tie that off. Now, before you tie it off, make sure you don't trap any unnecessary materials. So I come in there with my scissor tips. You can use a bodkin, and I just brush all the superfluous fibers we don't need out of the way. Pull that back. More finger work involved here than what I do to Garrett's mom. Okay, tied that off. Guys, girls, don't use your nice expensive scissors to cut your brushes. Use some side cutters. Okay, move your thread out of the way with your fingers. Come in nice and close. Trim. Okay, a couple extra wraps to secure. I'm then going to brush this material right and left. Make sure that I haven't trapped any of the fibers. I've chosen a black brush here. Okay, you can use a blurple brush. I think black is the best bet. Okay, and you can see that those couple of wraps that didn't look like much to start with. This part of the fly, I want to put the throat or the gill flare, okay, or the trigger into the fly. So I've got some red sculpting fiber. This sculpting fiber doesn't have any UV, doesn't have any flash in it. Okay, it can if you want. Like I said, I like to keep just the right amount of UV flash in there, not too much. I'll come in here and I will select a clump of SF. What I like to do at this point is I take the ends and I just try and pull them out a little bit so that they're not all equal. Okay, you don't want a square cut of materials, you want a nice blend of materials. Upside down, and I will then place this sculpting fiber down, apportioning the fibers equitably across the hook point and extending just slightly beyond. Push that down and using no more than 3 wraps. 3 is the magic number. 1, 2, 3. I secure that down. Now this tag end, we don't cut off, we're going to use that. We're going to stack the sculpting fiber in much the same way a lot of guys stack their deer hair. What I would recommend is that this length of fiber needs to be the same length of this fiber, if not marginally shorter. So what I'll do is I'll come in here. I will select some of my black sculpting fiber. This is a new pack that I'm opening here, and I want to show you a tip that I picked up off the Fishient website, or Fishient social media page rather. What I do here, it becomes quite a schlep to remove this material in and out and to manage. So a tip that they showed is you push this material out, take the ends out of there, just like that. I take a small cable tie and I wrap that around there. Put it on a little bit more. I wrap that around there like this. This is a real great hack for the management of your Steve Farrer blend and your sculpting fiber. And I just wrap that very tightly, like this. I can then remove this. Okay, and it's a lot easier to manage. It's still not great, but still a lot easier to manage than if I hadn't done so. Tighten it up. Let's just trim this. Right, I'm now going to be using a slightly longer, slightly thicker selection of this sculpting fiber material. This one's got a little bit of silver scale flash in it and UV. I like the flash to be over the shoulders of the fly, or the top portion of the fly, and I like the bottom portion of the fly to have as little flash as possible. So I will select a thicker, longer portion, which is important because the transition of the fly, the transition of the materials into the fly needed to be good. Okay, that seems more or less right. So I will taking my sculpting fiber and I'm laying it down so that the tips just extend into the hackles. Okay, I like to make sure that I've got a nice even distribution on all sides prior to tying it down. This is quite important, so I just brush it with my fingers, look at the fly from multiple angles, just like I did with the red sculpting fiber. I tie it down with 3 wraps. 3 is the magic number. Okay, now this particular tag end, I want to measure up against that length. It's a bit long. I want to make this tag end marginally shorter than this. Now this is a very important aspect. Each sequential step going forward as we add more and more sculpting fiber, I want that length and this length to be stepped. So you have that length, you lay this length down flat, and it's slightly stepped, and that's because when we brush the materials up and we cut it, it's going to help get that nice profile that you have here, okay, and the nice transition, so there's no like flat sort of cut. Okay, so I'm going to make that marginally shorter, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it at an angle. Before tying this in, just going to give it a nice brush, the material to flare. Okay, you can use a hair stacker, you can use the outside of a pen, or you can use your fingers. I just prefer to use a device, as I'm doing here. Get your Loctite ready. I'm going to put that there, and what I will now do is I will then take my tool in there and I will push these fibers backwards, just like I'm doing there, and I will brush and apportion them equitably. Just stab myself, be careful of that, it's not fun. Apportion them the way that I want. Okay, so I have that two-tone color there. Once I've apportioned them, I'm going to take my left hand, I'm going to pull those fibers back quite tightly, as such, and I'm going to wrap not over the fibers but in front of the fibers. I'm going to take a little bit of my Loctite and I'm going to dab it very sparingly over the base of those materials to help keep them seated where we want. I'm going to give a couple more wraps of thread because I don't want to get, I want to cover that Loctite. We've now created the gill flash, and the transition of material from the head into the hackles that makes the shoulder of the fly. Okay, I'm going to repeat that sequence. The difference is now I'm going to start creating the purple underbody. Now, okay, when strapping this, I'm going to use about 85% of the material for the bottom of the fly that I do on the top. So this purple underbody of the fly is going to be about 85% of the density of the top. Now that's important because I want this to be slightly softer, and that's for hook purchase purposes. I don't want it to obscure or prevent the hook purchase, in addition to the fact that I don't want this to be so hard as to push so much water that it's going to affect the tracking of the fly. I want water to pass through here a lot easier than it does on the top. Okay, so I'm going to select, and each successive or each sequential stack of fiber going forward, I'm going to use more and more sculpting fiber as I go forward. Recap: the underbody of the fly, the purple segment of the fly, will have about 85% of the density of the top portion of the fly to assist with the way that the fly swims and keels and to ensure correct purchase of the fly hook. Even having said that, each sequential step of sculpting fiber I move forward, I'm going to be increasing the density of the fly. That's going to help with the water turbulence, which is going to create a lot more movement over the back of the fly, and the water pushing attributes of this fly that are very important for low light conditions. Top section is the same as I had done earlier. I'm going to pinch the fibers over the top of the hook shank, marginally shorter than the last batch that I've just put in. Now I'm going to select some fibers for the underbody and the purple portion of the fly. Like I said, it's going to be slightly sparser than whatever the size clump is that I use for the top of the fly. And these clumps are going to be noticeably shorter than those of the top because you don't want to cover your gill flare. So I'm going to select a piece, the lengths of which are going to be marginally shorter. What's the magic number, guys? 3. that over there. Okay, nice and tight. Just make sure that it's secure there in the vise. Okay, it'd be nice if that vise wasn't moving around. Renzetti. Okay. Push those materials back. Apportion them with your fingers first. Pull them back nice and tightly, as such. Move my thread forward. I've got my Loctite ready, and I just apply the Loctite to the base of those materials. You don't want that Loctite to wick up into the materials. Couple wraps, and then I come in and I brush the fly. Again, I'm just going to continue on with sequentially increasing or wrapping down further segments of this sculpting fiber. Important to remember is that the bottom part of this fiber needs to be at about 85% of the density of the top, and each sequential segment that we add on there is slightly thicker, top and bottom, than the one that preceded it. Furthermore, on the top, each sequence that we tie in and we push back needs to be marginally shorter in length of material as we progress forward, to make sure that when you trim the fly, you've got a very nice transition going through. When you start reaching the hook eye, okay, as I have here, okay, you can use a Cohen's fugly packer, which I unfortunately have left at home like a moron. But what I like to do is really push this last little bit here as far back as you can to create that density at the front of the fly that's so important for the water pushing ability. So I've pushed that back quite considerably. I'm pulling it back quite hard with my fingers. Then I apply my Loctite. Okay, now for the final sequence, the final clumps that we add to this fly prior to tying off and trimming are going to be a lot sparser, and that just helps with the transition. Where is that fly, Gareth? Just helps with the transition, okay, and help keep that nice cylindrical shape that you can see there, spherical shape at the front. Okay, so in order to get that, I'm now going to take a sparse, thin piece of sculpting fiber for the final stack. I'm going to add that over the top. Magic number still 3. 1, 2, 2, 3. And I'm going to do so for exactly the same for the bottom. Small, thin. Maybe not that thin. There we go. Okay. Scissors. And I'm going to tie that one in there for the bottom. 1, 2, 3. Push them back. Portion them correctly. And try and push them and stack them as far back as you can. Couple of wraps of thread. I'm going to take my zapper gap. I'm going to apply it to the bases. I'm also wrapping that around my thread, which means that I don't have to do a whip finish. I can just take my scissors right there and then, and I can cut. And as usual, just brush that all in. And now we're at this part of the fly. I'm going to remove the hook from the vise. Okay. I'm going to start squishing that fly. Laying the materials flat. Trim job. Many different ways to trim. The initial cuts, as they say, first cuts are the deepest. Same holds true for this fly. So what I'm doing is I'm squashing the fly flat, apportioning the materials where I want them. I'm going to come in there and cut this material at an angle. Square, just like that, and then from there I'm going to start basically rounding those square edges, working my way into the fly. For the bottom I'm going to do the same. I'm going to cut quite a bit further in or closer to the hook shank. So I'd like to free that gap of materials to ensure purchase. Without a shadow of a doubt that I'm going to end up cutting a lot deeper and this material a lot shorter, but I'd rather slowly edge my way into the fly because this is a very time consuming process and I want to make sure that I don't bugger that up. Round the edges of my initial cut. I've given the fly sort of 85% of its trim job. It's not 100% perfect or to my usual standard. I'm being overly critical. It's a great fly. I'll still fish it, but I want the packing here to be maybe a little bit tighter. Anyway, I'm going to position and place the eyes of the fly, and once I've done so, I'm then going to give it another trim. So we pre-prepped the eyes a little bit earlier. Okay, so I'm going to look here more or less where I want to position the eye.
Sorry. You have to stop. Okay. Well, you can get things. I was on with this
The eye
sort of flotation.
push it around a bit, play around with material, get an idea
well,
where you
it's
want to put that
You're
eye.
looking for your flies?
No, I actually want to soak.
I have placed a small drop of Zappa Gap gel.
That will do the trick.
The gel super glue is very important for this process, and I've placed a small dollop
I've got silicone
on
base.
the in the middle of the eye over there.
Thank you very
It's
much.
not an exact science, guys. It tends to be a bit of a, don't always get this right all the time, so take your time when you're positioning it. Adjust the fibers, make sure that it's more or less in the right place where you want it. So place the fly in, and I'm pressing down very tightly and holding it in that position, which is important so that the gel tends to seep through into the materials, and we hope that it purchases onto the hook shank. Okay, what you can even do at that particular time is remove the fly and squash it in a crocodile clip or some clothesline peg. Just keep it in that position. Okay, I've now put another dollop in the second eye. And I'm looking at the other eye from all angles as a reference point for where I position this one. Before I squash it down in the right place. This is very, very important. Yeah, I've stuck the eyes on.
Maybe grab one or two white balls.
Okay, position more or less where I want them.
And also you can
And
see.
I'm just going to come in here and just give it another
Generally the hatches I have.
final little trim down.
That's what it's in. I don't know how many I'll kill.
To finish off this particular fly, I'm going to grab some solar rays thin, and I'm going to apply the solar rays thin on the ring or the outside of this fly eye so that it seeps into the materials and just helps give it greater purchase. I'm going to try and demonstrate that for you as best as we can. Once they've seeped, you're going to hit them with a UV torch right over like that.
Maximum is just 6, so 10.
So here's the finished pattern. I'd probably spend another 15-20 minutes superfluously trimming the fly. That's just my OCD. Probably one of the smaller patterns that I've tied. And yeah, it's a Dingane pattern. You can hear a nice, very audible rattle. It's got its profile, it maintains that teardrop shape throughout. If you're looking at that fly from every angle, you can see it maintains a great profile throughout. Nice water pushing abilities, nice visible eye in bright and low light conditions, and hopefully this slays another sharker.